All right. Next up, we have the future of retail banking made possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. I'd like to welcome to the stage Christian Catalini of Lightspark, Joey Garcia from Xapo Bank, and Nolan Bowerly, host of The Breakup. Give it up for him. There we go.
You go on the far end and I'll take this one. Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone. Welcome here at Bitcoin 2024. We're talking about retail banking today. And I'm Nolan Bowerly, I'm your host. I host a morning show called The Breakup. We take a look at the psychological engine behind banking and the economy and contrast it against fiat. Now, the contrasting against fiat is interesting because when we're talking about retail banking like today, retail banking is kind of like looking in the mirror. Our generation, or this generation of fiat that we're just coming out of, kind of invented it, right? What does it mean? So the history of it is pretty interesting. We're going to talk all about the history of it today. Luckily, we have two fellows that have deep experience in this business. Joey, you've been in the business for a long time. Tell me a little bit about your history in retail banking.
So, I mean, this is really interesting, right? So if we talk about banking services and Bitcoin, so two diametrically opposite kind of phases, you hear it all the time today. People are talking about access to BTC in a secure way, all of these different models. And I always like to use the analogy, Xapo was a Bitcoin wallet provider, so Bitcoin custodian, probably the largest in the world back in 2013. We then sold the institutional arm to Coinbase, etc. But we've been in this game for a long time. You know, 2013 is quite a long time ago in the BTC sort of context. But, you know, we were talking about the value of BTC openly and honestly in 2014. In 2015, we were recognized as, you know, the Fort Knox of Bitcoin. Everyone now talks about the World Economic Forum and Davos, and everyone talking about crypto in a certain way. We were making representations at Davos in 2015, talking about a unit of digital gold and what it actually meant. We were talking about inflationary pressures in 2016. You know, it's been a long, long history. But again, sometimes people talk about Bitcoin, let's call it wallet providers and the VASP universe on one end, and banks and retail banking on the other end. And they don't mix. So we wanted to create that kind of bridge between the two. And I think the best analogy I can use for this and why you need a Xapo, why it needs. You need to be a Bitcoin and blockchain native business that steps into the banking world, not a banking business that now has an exploratory arm into the blockchain universe. And we are Bitcoin native and blockchain native. We always have been. The analogy that I was going to say before, Nolan, is, you know, the electric light bulb didn't come around from, you know, the development of the candle. It needs a new start, it needs a new adoption, and that is exactly what we are, and that's what we've built. So we wanted to build something to service people and provide them with that accessible sort of bridge between the two worlds. Yeah.
Now, you know, when I think of, like I said, the bit of the history of retail here, it kind of grew out of services that were not available almost, right? We see what banking was in the free banking era. We see what wealthy people get from Goldman Sachs as far as banking services. It's a lot more thorough than what we get in retail banking. In retail banking is we get some cards, we get a little bit of help with transactions. That stuff's important though, right? We can't forget that just the ability to transact and use these pipes is a big thing. So we'll talk about the other services in a second. But Christian, you're working with Lightspark. You've been looking at Lightning for a while. You know, the idea that we can transact without these third-party intermediaries, that we can use software to secure commercial relationships between buyers and sellers in a P2P way is a real fundamental difference. And it totally changes the toolkit of retail banking. And you're right in the middle of that. What tools are you looking at? What are we giving up and what are we getting from this change?
Yes, I think crypto has been now around for a while, but in terms of really changing the experience from retail banking to global payments, I think we're starting to see the seeds of that just in the last few years. It took a while for the technology to mature and develop. The founding team of Lightspark, when we came together again after the Libra journey, we're still very passionate about this idea of building a truly open protocol for money movement, right? So Bitcoin is a wonderful store of value. It has made tremendous progress on the institutional side. Think about the ETF approval, the recent ETF approval. But when it comes to Bitcoin, the network, I think we're extremely early days. And so when we came together again, we focused on the one network that could really become that truly open and highly available protocol for money, and it is Bitcoin. Of course, Bitcoin on layer 1 doesn't scale, and so we focused on Lightning. We spent, I would say, the first year and a half of Lightspark's life in really making Lightning easy to use, enterprise grade, something that the likes of Xapo Bank, Bitso, Coinbase, Nubank, and many others can really use at scale, not with millions of users, eventually billions of users, because that's kind of where we're going, and transforming this technology that has been around now for a while into something that can touch everyday consumers' experiences, everyday small and medium businesses' experiences, and of course, money movement from tiny, tiny fractions of a cent to millions and millions of dollars. We've grown this very strong conviction that the only one asset that can support all of that, including all the banking experiences that Xapo and others are building, is Bitcoin. And we've been narrowly focused on really making Bitcoin succeed.
Yeah, and again, when I look at that contrast between, what we saw with Libra even, right? Remember when Libra started? And it came into the market, and a lot of Bitcoiners said, oh, shitcoin and all that. Of course, all of that's true. But what it did was it brought the full field of play. It brought the whole game into focus. When you could start to see that the money wouldn't be bound by a jurisdiction anymore, and that it was now totally portable across these borders, you could see finally, remember, if they hauled everyone's ass in, right? The Congress in America said, what the heck is this? Everyone come in and testify. But the contrast was an important thing, right? Bitcoin, out of those hearings, came out, that's where the word shitcoin came from. Like it was first popularized then to contrast with Bitcoin. And Libra did a lot to show the benefits of Bitcoin. So when you're thinking about, Xapo, you'd been around for that. You saw that coming.
Yeah.
Was that in line with what you guys saw? When you saw the Libra piece coming out, really giving up the game, right? Things that we said, not secretly, but we talked about amongst ourselves, a whole other side of the world was not ready for this reality change that was there.
Yeah.
And it came all at once. Was Xapo enthusiastic about this?
Yeah, I think, we were part of the Libra Association as well. I was the representative on Libra, and Wences, our chairman, currently was on the board of Libra. And I was talking to Christian earlier, the alignment of what Libra was aiming to accomplish is really, if you think about it, partially at least, covered by what Lightspark is doing with a kind of Xapo integration. Very different sort of way, but the alignment of the mission is still there. And from our point of view, you're 100% right. I'm not going to go into all the legal and reg triggers around the globe that Libra had. That gets quite difficult. But ultimately, think about an efficient payment system in and out of your bank account. We all take that very for granted. People talk about SWIFT and they talk about SEPA and they talk about, it's brutally inefficient. But now go to a bank and say, reconstruct your entire infrastructure to facilitate a Bitcoin-placed transaction that converts automatically and appears in your bank account. They'll look at you with blank and open eyes and say, oh, we have some research division that are looking at this. But the reality is, but that's what I mean from our point of view as a really blockchain native and Bitcoin native business. That's exactly what we've aimed to do and achieve. And we have it up and running now. So in the last month, I think 30% of our deposits have been over Lightspark and the Lightning network, and it's up maybe 4x, I think, on 12 months. So you can see that sort of starting to move. And not only that, I mentioned the words on the kind of intro, the bridge between the two worlds. So, the banking world, whether people like it or not, classic payment systems, they need to exist for certain things. But we want to add these layers of efficiency. So you can send a USDC transaction into your USD bank account immediately at no cost and out. So we're bridging that gap, and what Lightspark and the Lightning Network does is really efficiently build out on the Bitcoin protocol and network. So we have it there as a store of value, as a way to protect and grow your wealth in an ultra secure environment, with a savings proposition that allows you to actually earn interest on BTC at no risk. But we're using it with Lightspark to implement all of those other efficient rails, using the technology for the right purpose that it can be used for.
So you guys are definitely cooking together. I can see why this relationship would create all kinds of interesting commercial opportunities for users of Bitcoin, enjoyers of Bitcoin. When I think about the changes, though, that the products that can arrive from the two of you working together, again, I contrast it with what we see in banking. Retail banking, as it's come to be defined, it's really sort of we've been left here in default through the history of it. The services that we see as retail, no one set out to make these services. They're the result of the higher end services that you find in private banking kind of being inaccessible. They don't scale because you require high IQ individuals with a Series 7 license to be able to help you and navigate this type of commercial transaction, prime brokerage and securitized lending. These things didn't make sense to anyone or weren't known to anyone who didn't understand Bitcoin before. If you just came at this from a normal, I'm trying to save my paycheck, you didn't know what any of this stuff was. Bitcoin has sort of democratized at least the understanding of these tools that were usually only available to private bankers at Goldman Sachs as a service that they could offer super wealthy clients. When you see the types of stuff you're cooking with Lightspark, do you see that opportunity where you don't have to follow the prescriptive trail of what retail banking has offered? It's not just cards and checking accounts, savings accounts. With your technology cooked together, bound together, you can start picking up on trends in the industry. Do you see this technology as offering access to all of these financial tools that really Larry Fink was offering to a couple of people because of scalability, right? It was hard to scale these types of contracts. It looks like we can do that. Is that sort of in line with your vision?
I tend to think about the way crypto is progressively reshaping the entire financial stack and rewiring the financial sector in layers. And so the first layer is payments. Before we can build anything more complex, we need to be able to move value across borders, real time, 24/7, instantaneously with as little friction as possible. And ironically, 10 years into or more into the Bitcoin experiment, I think we're still not there. Now, with universal money addresses, we're making a lot of progress, which is essentially realizing that you don't need a stablecoin, right? So if you're trying to move value between two countries, and as it turns out, people love Bitcoin on both sides, you can quickly go in and out of the Lightning Network, you convert at the edges, and suddenly people have an experience that's very familiar, but also very difficult to achieve in traditional banking, right? So there are services that allow you to move money easily between different countries and regions, but not everybody uses them, not everybody has access to them. And so what we're trying to do together is really democratize that functionality where no matter where your different bank accounts might be located, what kind of use cases you have in mind, value from one place to the other can be instantaneously moved with no friction. And I think that's a concept that's super simple, but the basic idea of sending money as simple as sending an email is going to be truly transformative. Banking hasn't done that yet.
Now, when you say in layers and that the transaction layer is sort of the bottom, I could push back on that using Xapo here as an example because one of the things I think that separates retail banking from, let's call it institutional, has all kinds of titles, rich people banking, let's say, is that savings, of course, was a stupid idea with fiat. You got to become a financial engineer. You're competing against them, and if that's there, if it requires a high IQ to participate, even in the savings, you don't have money to move around. You're not even getting in the point where you're transferring. And I understand you have things to pay for and all that, but when I'm talking about complex or fruitful commercial investments, contracts, relationships, things you can do, having saving money being easy, having that as a base layer is really important. Xapo, of course, builds its whole business off of that. That's why Bitcoin is fundamental to Xapo, is it not?
Yeah, I think there's so many. Let me break this down into a few points, and lots of really good points and questions, Nolan. But think about the base layer of a payments network for a standard retail account user. So you have an account at whatever bank it might be, HSBC, JPM or Chase or whoever you like. The way that banking world allows you to transact with a bank is very restrictive. It's becoming more and more restrictive. So they're trying to widen the gap, disconnect the crypto ecosystem from the banking ecosystem. Let's say a crypto exchange and a trading platform. That's not a regulated, arguably not a regulated custodian to hold, store securely your BTC, let's say. So maybe you wanted to sell some and hold it on some secure deposit or whatever it might be. That bridge is very, very difficult. So with Lightspark, one of the key points is exactly that, bridging that gap between the two, and the UMA network that these guys are building that Chrissy can talk about is exactly that. You're trading on platform XYZ, that's for trading. Xapo is not for trading. Xapo is to hold, store, protect, and grow your wealth. And Lightspark is the bridge between the two. So that's on the base layer with the normal guys, and then going up the scale to the high net worth or institutional, you're also 100% right. So in the classic days, if you want to open a private bank account in XYZ in Switzerland or wherever it might be, that sounds wonderful. You need $10 to $15 million to have a starting point conversation, and you'll be at the bottom of the bracket. So we want to offer those services to a wider audience and a wider network. So of course we offer, whatever, 4.6% on your USD, but we pay it in Satoshi because we are Bitcoin native. We offer your savings account in BTC and you earn interest on that. That's completely Bitcoin native. And the things that we're building out, the products and services, we call it sort of superpowering your Bitcoin. So you're holding it securely and it's growing and safely, but you have access to your bank because it's in one application. It's all being
I like
together.
that frame of superpowering Bitcoin, because that's exactly when you think about these layers, right? Having that fundamental base of Bitcoin allows you to start seeing how you can manipulate it, how you can use it, how you can make it useful for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned UMA. I'm glad you did that. Hart taught me years ago. I have to thank him. I've never had the chance to thank him. He turned me on to Unisocks. Remember the original protocol? And you could do some sock trading and all that stuff. So now he built UMA years ago and launched it very successfully. One of the things that makes me think of is when you talk about supercharging Bitcoin and what I mentioned earlier about scaling these services, because indeed the Swiss bank account, the reason it costs $10 to $15 million is because the human being they were hiring to help you came with a very expensive ticket and a lot of incentive to get them to even do that in the first place. What does UMA, that's the kind of software replacing these human services where we can get these incredible commercial relationships scaled to the retail user. What does UMA offer you guys for that? I understand the Oracle-based nature of it, but what can be built off of UMA that can help the retail person?
Yeah, so Universal Money Addresses build on Lightning addresses. So there are a set of open source extensions that we released that achieve three important things. The first one is making it extremely simple to send and receive money from a person or from a business. So everyone has an address like $joey@xapo.com. That's how I can reach him. That's how he can send me money, how I can receive money from him. That's the first part. The second one is effects. Conversion between any currency, any crypto, to any currency, any crypto. So that if I want to send dollars to Mexican pesos, or euros to Naira, or dollars to Bitcoin, I can do all of these transformations and hide them behind the scenes. Because to your point about how will the banking experience change, I think some of the concept will remain familiar, right? So people will still think potentially in their home currency, if they're not fully orange pill yet, and they'll want to translate and move value in the currency that they're familiar with. So UMA allows you to do that. And of course, allowing entities like Xapo and other regulated institutions like Coinbase, Nubank, Bitso, and many more that are coming onto the network in the near future to fulfill their requirements, right? So these are regulated institutions, so when they move value, they have to check a number of boxes. When you put it all together, I think it changes the nature of banking, right? So before, banking would happen just in the Xapo app. But in the future, the Xapo experience will meet you where you are. So imagine you're a creator in a creator economy app, or you're like, in a marketplace. why do you need to connect those pipes in such a clunky and slow way? Ideally, your banking experience will travel with you, whether you're purchasing something or you're transacting with someone else. It will disappear behind the scenes, and everything will be a lot more frictionless. Because when I think about banking today, even just sending money abroad, even for high net worth customers, well banked, it's still cumbersome. It's still not efficient. It's still not 24/7.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the creator economy piece, because indeed, if you look at it on the marketplace, particularly for retail, and you see X getting its money services licenses, right? I worked at CoinDesk for years, and I remember when Binance started its news feed, I walked into the CoinDesk editorial room and I said, "We're number 2 in media today." And no one knew what I said. I said, "Yeah, but Binance has more page views and now they have news. Does it matter that there's some big editorial thing?" No, that we're seeing a convergence of content apps and financial services apps. I mean, that's what the Coinbase wallet was always about. If you look at Cash App, for example, the news feed has been right next to with the Bitcoin magazine. News articles have been right next to the Buy Bitcoin button. So indeed, when I think of the financial services that are available to content creators, we're not there yet, but you can imagine a distribution platform and financial services being all available to these people, because it's simply not there right now. We don't have anything it's donations. It's just give me some money, right? Now, all of that said, when you said meet them where they are, some of this makes me think of bimetallism, right? Have you guys, the concept of bimetallism? We're hearing Javier Milei talk about it a lot right now. El Salvador is bimetal, right? Bimetallism is one money for consuming, one money for saving. It's what America had before they went with the gold standard and the fiat thing. And bimetallism really does offer you this savings money and then all kinds of financial applications. Even when you hear Trump talk about Bitcoin, when he says, "I prefer one," but he's mentioning that the reality is we're entering a new world. And indeed, meeting people where they are, like you're saying, by industry vertical, by nationality. The political money looks like it's becoming even more political. It's going to become to fulfill policy objectives, right? Keep these people from starving and keep these people, all that stuff. So we can see this stuff playing. So when you look at it globally like this, do you start thinking in terms of those frames? Like, how can I create interesting financial services while making savings sort of the easiest possible threshold?
It's a difficult one. I mean, we've taken a view on Bitcoin and the Bitcoin network since we started in 2013, and we're not going to change that view. So secure accessibility, secure storage, the proper custodianship and arrangements, the interaction with your financial services world, and then that sort of bridging merger between the crypto world and the classic world, the stablecoin payment rails, the Lightning Network. People sometimes talk about CBDCs and all these wonderful initiatives at the Fed level and the Bank of England and all this stuff. And I always say, look, this is all very fascinating stuff, but if that goes live and the Bank of England issue a digital pound or the Fed issue a digital dollar, all of the banks have got to learn how this entire ecosystem works and provide a secure, wallet service. That sounds pretty simple, and the way that it's going to interact. So we feel that we're doing that already. Did we start adding Ethereum to our wallet? No, of course not. We're very concentrated on this market. So in answer to your question, will our view change? It can, but we've delivered that message since 2013 of what people should do to expose themselves to this asset in a secure way, and we've built massive regulatory frameworks and security around the way that we do that, and I don't think that that's going to change. I don't think that that's going to change.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, the reason why we focused on Bitcoin is that if you think about the challenge of moving value, not just between a few countries, but between 200 or more countries, right? Every day, 24/7, with deep liquidity, there's only one asset, and that asset is Bitcoin. It has regulatory clarity. It has on and off ramps in pretty much every country around the globe. And so suddenly, if you look back, sometimes people say crypto hasn't done much, right? But we've built infrastructure with Bitcoin as the most secure and decentralized network. We built infrastructure with the regulated institutions like Xapo Bank and others. And now we can connect it all in an open way. So to your point about different platforms, whether it's X or someone else doing this on their own, it's very different when you join an open network that's based on Bitcoin, and now you can all interoperate. We haven't seen that before, right? So PayPal acquired Venmo many years ago. Actually, my co-founder led that acquisition, and you still can move value between those two apps, right, effectively. I think we're going into a future where people will be able to move value, and then to your point about savings, maybe we'll have an AI agent that will take our preferences and just go out and make good decisions, and a big part of that will be Bitcoin.
I've often believed, I did a talk last year on that AI would be our wallet. It's going to be our major. I wrote a sci-fi book about it even called An Eyeball, where the eyeball helps you transact in Bitcoin. But it's important indeed to think about the what developers can do with this technology, because it's open source, right? So if someone does come up with a clever way to secure a financial relationship between content consumers and content creators, then theoretically it can enter the Xapo Lightspark relationship and be brought into the retail banking services. Is that what you're building, that you can gather the open source development bottom-up community?
It could be. I mean, I think when you think about the way that people buy, own, and store BTC, or the way that they want to interact with, let's just call it a wider payment services network or world, Bitcoin's been around for a long time. The guys that bought BTC 10 years ago, and you bought sort of $150, and you had sort of some asset, and it was really interesting, and you earned a Bitcoin, and then you bought some more at $500. It was all very interesting. And you had all these ways to store that, or you were using trading platforms or unregulated networks in different parts of the world, and you didn't really care. Like, if I lose my wallet with $100, it's a bit annoying, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, hopefully. But when that BTC then becomes worth $500,000 or $1 million or whatever it is, suddenly the way that you interact and you provide services and payment networks and storage facilities becomes much, much more important. And we are forever. So we didn't just, we don't use the word bank, we are a bank. So when I say that we're providing ultra secure systems to help people store and control that asset and interact with a wider ecosystem, you have to do it in a very specialist and narrow way. And it's also about mass or wider adoption. So if I start talking about, very technical multi-sig style arrangements between a family arrangement, whatever it may be, fantastic concept. But my sister is not going to do that. She wants like the simplicity of an interaction with a counterpart that she trusts, that's tried, tested, and everything else. And that will allow an entire different network to access, and that's really what we're focusing on. So the answer to your question is yes, but there's also a massive wider world that we're looking to service. And last point I'll mention, because we're here in the US, and people don't really worry that much about inflation and the USD value, and maybe similar if you're in the UK or arguably in the Eurozone, etc. But when people talk about Bitcoin value proposition, you speak to the guys in Argentina that have lived like 3 currency collapses in one lifetime, or the guys in Venezuela, or the guys in Zimbabwe. So that is the market that we're also looking to service in a very specific way. We believe in the concept and value of Bitcoin as a storage of value, and we want to offer it in the securest possible way, in the most efficient way. And
we really need to expand the set of institutions and participants, because to date, of course, crypto exchanges, crypto banks like Xapo are engaged in the Bitcoin ecosystem, but we need to get to billions of users, right? So it's all about, with universal money addresses, bringing on entities that maybe allow you to buy, sell, hold, but that's it. They've not allowed you to move it in and out, or to transfer, or to use it really as a payment network. I think as we start doing that, and all the words neobanks come onto this new structure, suddenly people will realize that Bitcoin is the best asset for global money movement, and a whole new range of applications and use cases will emerge. I think we're actually pretty close. As we bring the first 100, 200, 300 million on it, then things will go very fast.
Yeah, to me, what I see is and we'll wrap it up with this thought. It's sort of the blending of consumer technology and the opposite of that, which is Lindy effect, not the iPhone 15, 16, Plain old Bitcoin.
Yep.
Right? Plain old Bitcoin.
Exactly.
All right, everyone, please give a warm round of applause for our great panelists here. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.